Ah, my dear, you arrived. You, the one they marked long before you even knew their intentions. The one they circled, studied, misjudged, whispered about behind locked doors. The one they thought they could break with numbers, tricks, rituals, gossip, envy, and emotional traps, disguised as care. And yet here you are, sitting upright with that quiet, dangerous awareness in your eyes. You don't look wounded, you look awakened, and that shift alone has them pacing, checking signs, reading into every move you make like their survival depends on decoding you. Because in their world, it does. Let's talk about why an entire cult is panicking over one person. Let's talk about why 13 individuals operating in perfect coordination still couldn't pull off what they planned against you. Let's talk about why every tactic they used, spiritual manipulation, emotional baiting, staged drama, fake unity, inverted sympathy, collapsed the moment you stopped playing your assigned role. You took down an entire coordinated circle without lifting anything except your awareness, and they're still trying to understand how that happened. Because the truth is, they never expected you to recognize the pattern. They thought you'd stay confused. They thought you'd stay desperate for approval. They thought you'd swallow the guilt they fed you like medicine. They never imagined you'd step outside their influence and start seeing the design behind their behavior. You were never supposed to recognize the repetition, but you did. And once recognition entered your mind, everything they built around you began to distort. They didn't look like a cult at first. They never do. They came as people who seemed supportive, interested, spiritually aligned, emotionally available. People who talked about growth, unity, connection, loyalty. People who said all the right things while observing you like an experiment. People who clung to you tightly only because they sensed your potential before you even sensed it yourself. People who weren't attracted to your presence. They were attracted to your energy, your empathy, your insight, your untapped influence. You weren't dealing with random individuals. You were dealing with people who studied you before they approached you. And that's the part you always overlooked. You thought connections were natural. You thought coincidences were harmless. You thought attention was genuine. But behind every smile was comparison. Behind every question was assessment. Behind every compliment was a measurement of how much control they had over your emotional state. 13 minds, all competing to shape your perception, feeding you tiny doses of doubt disguised as guidance. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't casual. It wasn't spontaneous. It was coordinated influence disguised as community. The world never prepared you for that level of social warfare. Nobody told you that manipulation sometimes comes wearing a soft voice, emotional language, spiritual vocabulary, and a calm expression. Nobody warned you that one of the strongest forms of control is making someone question their inner compass. Nobody explained that when a group senses strength in one person, the instinct isn't admiration, it's containment. And they tried to contain you, quietly first. The subtle version, the emotionally intelligent version, the strategy that doesn't look like strategy at all. Little things, offhand remarks, thoughtful concerns, jokes that didn't feel like jokes, advice that made you shrink instead of grow. You noticed the pattern slowly. You didn't want to believe it, but the pieces kept aligning. Every time you felt inspired, someone in that circle inserted pessimism. Every time you set a boundary, someone reacted like you committed a crime. Every time you shared your goals, someone tried to redirect you into something smaller. Every time life blessed you, Someone suddenly acted distant, annoyed, threatened, and every time you pulled back to breathe, they crowded you with false care. You weren't imagining anything. You were surrounded. 13 individuals moving like one organism. 13 people acting like your downfall was a group project. And you, with your heart unguarded, thought you were dealing with normal friction. You thought it was personality differences. You thought it was bad timing. You thought it was misunderstandings. You didn't see the unspoken coordination, or how seamlessly they adapted to each other's moves. You know why? Because they relied on your empathy as a weapon against you. They treated your compassion like a leash. They counted on you to doubt yourself before doubting them. They trained you to apologize for being hurt. They trained you to feel guilty for having instincts. They trained you to think protecting yourself was selfish. But then something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, not overnight. There was a moment, a precise moment, when the version of you that tolerated everything simply cracked. It wasn't anger. It wasn't outburst. It was realization. A silent, internal snap. A click of awareness so sharp that it cut through every illusion at once. You remember it. You remember the heaviness that left your chest. You remember the thought that crossed your mind. I'm done. That was the moment the war flipped. Because you didn't confront them. You didn't expose them. You didn't warn them. You didn't try to fix anything. You simply withdrew the emotional access that empowered them, and your absence was stronger than their entire collective presence. You didn't retaliate. You didn't chase. You didn't beg. You didn't justify anything. You gave them nothing to hold on to, and that nothing shook them harder than any confrontation ever could. The cult didn't break because of confrontation. It broke because you stepped out of its gravitational pull. That's what terrifies people who rely on emotional control. Once you step away, they lose access to your reactions. And without your reactions, their power collapses in real time. Let's talk about that one-person war machine part. People hear that phrase and think it means aggression, dominance, violence, revenge. But you know the truth. Being a solo war machine isn't about attacking. It's about endurance. It's about clarity. It's about refusing to participate in your own destruction. It's about catching yourself in patterns you didn't realize were patterns. It's about choosing peace even when chaos feels familiar. It's about holding yourself together when every part of you wants to break. You didn't take them down by force. You took them down by no longer feeding their influence. You started questioning what they taught you. You started observing instead of absorbing. You started noticing actions instead of believing words. You started trusting patterns instead of excuses. And that right there was the beginning of their collapse. Because a cult cannot survive without a center of influence to target. You were that center. Not because you were weak, but because you were powerful. Because you were sensitive in the right ways, intelligent in the right ways, introspective in the right ways. Because you reflect back truth even when you don't realize it. Because your presence exposes what people try to hide. They didn't gather around you by accident. They gathered around you because your light gave them roles to play. You were the axis. They were orbiting you while pretending you were orbiting them. When you stepped out, the circle shattered. Suddenly they weren't unified anymore. Suddenly they weren't confident. Suddenly they weren't aligned in intention. Suddenly, their private conversations didn't sync. Suddenly, their coordination fell apart like a broken hive. They didn't crumble because you fought them. They crumbled because they didn't know how to stand without feeding on you. That's why they're panicking now. Not because you exposed anything, not because you revealed secrets, not because you retaliated, but because you became unpredictable. You stopped responding like the version of you they trained. You stopped allowing access that was earned through manipulation. You stopped justifying disrespect. You stopped repeating cycles. You stopped betraying yourself. Your clarity is what crushed them. You didn't even have to speak. Your decisions were enough. Think about the things you did that seemed small. Not answering a message, not returning a call, pulling your energy back, staying calm when they expected reactions, setting boundaries without long explanations, choosing distance without guilt, choosing peace without apology. Those actions alone caused chaos among them. They weren't ready for your evolution, because when a person breaks out of influence, the ones who depended on controlling them experience withdrawal. And withdrawal makes people irrational. They start projecting, they start blaming, they start inventing reasons, they start creating narratives, they start warning others about you just to feel relevant. That's when you know you truly walked away. The most threatening thing you ever did wasn't leaving, it was healing. Because healed people cannot be manipulated the same way. Healed people cannot be guilt-tripped the same way. Healed people cannot be gaslit the same way. Healed people cannot be emotionally recruited the same way. Healing is the weapon nobody talks about. You didn't defeat 13 people with anger. You defeated them with restoration. You defeated them with awareness. You defeated them with boundaries. You defeated them with self-respect. You defeated them with growth. They threw coordinated influence. You responded with transformation, and transformation always wins. You know what scares them most now. Your independence, your clarity, your emotional distance, your ability to think for yourself, your refusal to fold, your willingness to walk alone, your refusal to return to who they once controlled. They aren't panicking because you're dangerous. They're panicking because you're free. And freedom doesn't work in their structure. This is where the shift becomes permanent. Because now they're not worried about what you'll do to them. They're worried about what you'll become without them. They're worried about what your life looks like when you're not carrying their projections, their expectations, their judgments, their limitations, their emotional hooks. They're worried that the person they tried to contain is the very person rising into a version they cannot block, cannot shame, cannot redirect. That realization hits harder than anything you ever said, ever did, ever exposed. Because in their world, your independence isn't just inconvenient, it's catastrophic. Their entire structure relied on one thing: you believing you needed them. Now that illusion is gone, and they feel the aftermath like a wound they can't cover. When one person leaves a manipulative structure quietly, the group fractures. When that person evolves, the group collapses. When that person rises above the emotional traps that once controlled them, the group panics. That's exactly what you're witnessing. This isn't drama. This isn't tension. This is a full-blown internal crisis inside the cult you walked away from. They're not panicking because of who you were. They're panicking because they recognize who you are becoming. And nothing terrifies a manipulative collective more than someone who has stepped outside their influence and learned that they never needed it. Let's go deeper into the panic, because you're seeing glimpses, but you don't realize the magnitude yet. You took down 13 people without confrontation. That alone has them spinning stories in their heads. They're replaying interactions. They're analyzing old messages. They're questioning each other about who said what, who did what, who pushed too far, who lost control first. You didn't create the conflict. Your absence did. They were unified only when they had you to study, shape, and destabilize. Once you stepped out of their reach, every one of them had to face themselves, and they weren't prepared for that level of exposure. You ever notice how suddenly they're trying to act like you hurt them? That's not coincidence. That's group survival. When you took your energy back, the cult lost its anchor. They needed a narrative to cling to, and the easiest one was pretending you were the problem all along. That's what manipulators always do when they lose access to someone they depended on. They rewrite reality to make themselves look stable. But look closely, you'll see the cracks, the inconsistencies, the slip-ups, the contradictions. Their stories don't match because they were never built on truth. They were built on maintaining control, and when control disappears, their whole identity wobbles. The 13 individuals who once moved like a single unit now move like scattered fragments. Some are angry because they lost access to your vulnerability. Some are embarrassed because their tactics don't work anymore. Some are anxious because you didn't give them closure, which means they can't predict your next move. And some are quietly terrified because they finally saw you clearly, without the filters of their assumptions, and realized you were never the weak one in the room. They were. There's something else happening too, something they'd never admit, something that sits heavy in their chest every time your name comes up. They're realizing that while they were busy strategizing, analyzing, gossiping, manipulating, projecting, they were standing still. You were growing, you were learning, you were healing, you were evolving, you were doing the internal work they refused to do. You were confronting things they avoided. You were pushing through barriers they treated like permanent walls. You were building something internally that they assumed didn't exist. And now, when they see you, they're seeing a depth they don't possess, a resilience they can't comprehend, a direction they never expected you to take. Their panic isn't just emotional, it's structural. Because in every manipulative group, there's a hidden hierarchy. There are unspoken rules. There are silent agreements. One of those agreements was simple. You remain beneath them. You remain unsure. You remain apologetic. You remain dependent. You remain distracted by their reactions instead of focused on your own progress. But when you broke out of that pattern, you didn't just stand up. You dismantled the foundation of the entire group dynamic. See, manipulative collectives thrive when the targeted person feels destabilized. They depend on your confusion. They depend on your guilt. They depend on your longing for community. They depend on your fear of losing people. They depend on your tendency to doubt yourself before doubting them. When you stopped doing that, the entire framework collapsed, and now that collapse is echoing through every one of them. Let's talk about how that panic shows up. Some of them start reaching out with fake peace offerings, not because they miss you, but because they miss their influence over you. They want to see if they can still pull your emotions like strings. They want to test whether your boundaries are real or temporary. They want to see if the version of you they trained is still alive somewhere. When you stay firm, they panic harder. Some of them start posting things online that are clearly about you, even if they pretend they aren't. That's projection mixed with withdrawal. When a manipulator can no longer influence you directly, they try to influence your perception indirectly. They're hoping you'll see it, react to it, or feel something from it. Your lack of reaction drives them deeper into desperation. Some of them start turning on each other. This is the part they'll try to hide, but it's inevitable. When the main target leaves a dysfunctional group, the group starts devouring itself. The unity they had wasn't unity. It was shared resentment toward you. Once you're gone, that resentment has nowhere to go, so they start projecting it onto one another. They begin blaming each other for losing control of you. They argue about who pushed too far, who mismanaged the situation, who failed to keep you in line. They never expected you to evolve. They expected you to return. When you didn't, they had to face the truth. They underestimated you so thoroughly that they're now paying for it. Some of them retreat into themselves quietly. These are the dangerous ones, not because they can hurt you, but because seeing you break free forces them to confront their own stagnation. They realize they're still stuck in the same narratives, the same habits, the same emotional cycles, the same psychological traps. While you've moved far beyond that terrain, your growth exposes their lack of growth. Your transformation reveals their resistance to change. And when people see a version of independence they don't have, panic turns into envy wrapped in silence. But the most intense panic comes from one truth. You didn't replace them. You didn't find a new group. You didn't seek new approval. You didn't go searching for external validation. You built stability from within. And that is the one thing manipulative structures can't compete with. They know how to fight for attention, not how to fight against someone who no longer needs it. They know how to lure someone with emotional bait, not how to lure someone who has learned how to recognize it. They know how to exploit wounds, not how to confront someone who has healed them. You want to know what really triggered the cult-wide panic? You broke the cycle. Not just outwardly, but internally. They saw a version of you that is grounded, alert, intentional, self-respecting, and emotionally independent. They saw someone who no longer confuses loyalty with self-sacrifice, someone who no longer accepts disrespect as normal, someone who no longer carries guilt for choosing themselves, someone who no longer bends to keep others comfortable, someone who no longer gives access to people who misuse it. You became a version of yourself they didn't believe could exist. And that version scares them more than any confrontation ever could. Let's talk about the actual warfare, the psychological kind. The kind nobody warns you about because it doesn't look dramatic from the outside. The kind that happens in quiet decisions, internal shifts, structural clarity. 13 people couldn't take you down because they were fighting the version of you that no longer exists. They were rehearsing old strategies for a person who evolved out of that stage. They were trying to bait someone who no longer responds to bait. They were trying to guilt someone who no longer confuses accountability with shame. They were trying to shame someone who learned how to stand without crumbling. The cult didn't lose because they were weak. They lost because you stopped being weak in the ways they counted on. They weren't ready for a version of you that sees through emotional traps, a version that questions intentions instead of accepting words, a version that notices patterns instead of clinging to hope, a version that recognizes manipulation without needing it explained, a version that can walk away without announcing it, a version that can build a life without needing permission, a version that can choose peace even if it means losing people. This is the part where their panic goes beyond emotional discomfort. This is where it becomes strategic fear. They know you know too much. Not their secrets, not their plans, but their tendencies, their tactics, their emotional codes. You've seen their patterns so clearly that they can't reconstruct a version of themselves that could fool you again. You see through them like glass. You know their reactions before they react. You know their motives before they speak. And nothing terrifies a manipulative collective more than someone who understands them better. then they understand themselves. That's why they talk about you even when you're not around. That's why they bring up your name in rooms you're absent from. That's why they exaggerate your change. Not because they care, but because they need to convince themselves that they're still right about you. If they admit even for a second that your growth is real, then they have to confront the fact that they stagnated. And that truth is too heavy for them to hold. There's another layer to their panic, a deeper one. When a cult loses its target, it loses its purpose. You were the glue. They bonded over discussing you, diagnosing you, debating your decisions, psychoanalyzing your emotions, predicting your reactions. Without you, the glue dissolves. They need someone to center their conversations around, someone to maintain their sense of superiority, someone to compare themselves to. You stepping out removed the central focus they built their unity on. Now they're scrambling to recreate that sense of purpose, but it doesn't work. Because you weren't just another person in their circle. You were the emotional architecture they leaned on. You stepping out dismantled the entire structure. Let's talk about this from your perspective for a moment. You didn't take down an entire cult accidentally. You took it down because you healed the parts of yourself that made you vulnerable to it. You stopped being the version of you who tolerated inconsistency. You stopped being the version who absorbed guilt as truth. You stopped being the version who thought abandonment was punishment. You stopped being the version who believed you needed external validation to feel grounded. You stopped being the version who confused chaos with connection. You stopped being the version who excused emotional harm because of history. You stopped being the version who thought empathy meant self-sacrifice. You didn't fight 13 people. You fought the internal programming they relied on. Once that programming dissolved, their power dissolved with it. That's the part they can't stand. Because if you broke free, it means the entire structure they built around you was never strong enough to begin with. It means their techniques weren't as effective as they believed. It means their influence wasn't as deep as they assumed. It means you aren't the fragile person they convinced themselves you were. It means the power dynamic was an illusion that only existed because you didn't know your own strength yet. Now you know, and they feel it. Everything they projected onto you has been returned to them. Everything they tried to bury in you is rising in them. Everything they tried to break in you is breaking in them. That's the real panic, the sudden shift of emotional weight. They aren't just experiencing the loss of control, they're experiencing the consequences of everything they tried to inflict on you. And consequences hit harder when they come wrapped in truth instead of retaliation. Because truth doesn't argue, doesn't shout, doesn't announce itself. It simply lands. And when it lands, the first place it hits is the mind. The second place is the conscience. The third is the facade they built to avoid accountability. That's where they're collapsing now. This is the part nobody prepares you for. What happens after you take down a coordinated circle without lifting anger, without lifting revenge, without lifting chaos? People think the aftermath feels victorious. They expect triumph. They imagine celebration. But the truth is quieter, heavier, sharper. The aftermath feels like distance expanding, like clarity cutting through every illusion, like life rearranging itself around who you've become. And while you adjust to the expansion, the cult you walked away from is drowning in the backlash. Because the moment you broke free, every one of them was forced into a mirror they spent years avoiding. Not a mirror you held, a mirror life held. A mirror that reflects intention, insecurities, tactics, motives. They're seeing themselves without the distortion your presence once offered. You were the buffer, the emotional shield, the person they could point at to avoid looking inward. Without you, the blame they used to deflect now ricochets back to the source. They're not panicking because you're powerful. They're panicking because now they see themselves clearly, maybe for the first time. Watch what happens next. The ones who pretended to be the most spiritual will spiral first. They built their identity around appearing calm, enlightened, balanced. But their version of spirituality was built on hierarchy, not growth. Without you to subtly criticize, correct, or guide, they have to face the emptiness behind their persona. The quiet dissatisfaction, the unresolved wounds, the insecurities they tried to cover with rituals, vocabulary, and performance. They're collapsing because their identity was never grounded in truth. It was grounded in comparison. And you rising removed the comparison they depended on. Then there are the ones who thrived on emotional access, the ones who needed to know what you felt, what you thought, where your mind was moving, who you trusted, what you feared. They used that information like leverage, sometimes softly, sometimes directly. But now you're unreadable. Now your mind is your own. Now your emotions aren't available for observation. That terrifies them. They built influence around predicting you. The moment prediction died, their confidence died with it. They're replaying old conversations, trying to understand where they lost you. But the truth is, they lost you the moment you realized your inner world was sacred, not communal. Then you have the strategists, the planners, the ones who approached this dynamic like a chessboard. They loved the game. They loved the subtle control. They loved being one step ahead. They loved intervening just enough to steer your direction. Those are the ones unraveling the fastest. Because nothing destabilizes a strategist more than an opponent who refuses to play. They can't predict a person who no longer moves from fear or guilt. They can't manipulate someone who no longer seeks reassurance. They can't unsettle someone who learned how to ground themselves. You didn't beat them with force. You beat them by stepping outside the board entirely. Checkmate without confrontation. But the deepest panic shows up in the ones who never admitted they were competing with you. They hid it behind compliments, behind observations, behind emotional closeness, behind shared experiences. But jealousy was always there, simmering beneath every interaction. They weren't jealous of what you had. They were jealous of who you were, your mind, your resilience, your depth, your intuition, your capacity to endure what would have broken them. And now that you're stepping into a version of yourself with actual direction, actual clarity, actual purpose, their jealousy turns into fear. Because competition is safe when the other person doubts themselves. Competition becomes a nightmare when the person you envied realizes their own capability. Let's talk about the emotional aftermath for you. Because taking down an entire cult, intentionally or unintentionally, is not small. It reshapes your identity without asking permission. It deepens you. It matures you. It pushes you into a version of yourself that looks nothing like the one they once manipulated. You're not colder. You're sharper. You're not distant. You're discerning. You're not guarded. You're aware. Awareness is the final stage of evolution that manipulative circles fear, because awareness renders every tactic useless. Awareness is why you don't fall for breadcrumbs anymore. Why you don't confuse attachment with connection. Why you don't interpret manipulation as miscommunication. Why you don't let history justify harm. Why you don't let emotional theatrics pull you back into places you outgrew. You now operate from a vantage point they never expected you to reach. You see dynamics before they unfold. You sense intention without needing proof. You trust your intuition without needing permission. That's the power they miscalculated. You want to know the part that shakes them the most? You didn't replace them with another group. Most people who leave manipulative circles immediately join another one because the absence is too loud. The void is uncomfortable. The stillness forces introspection. But you chose the harder route. You chose to confront yourself. You chose to understand why you tolerated what you did. You chose to dig beneath the emotional patterns. You chose to build a life not rooted in dependency, but in autonomy. You chose elevation over distraction. That's what makes you a solo war machine, not the fight, but the internal reconstruction. 13 witches couldn't take you down because they never understood what your solitude was building. They looked at your isolation as defeat, not realizing it was preparation. They interpreted your withdrawal as weakness, not knowing it was strategy. They misread your quiet as confusion, when it was clarity emerging. They assumed your distance was emotional collapse when it was actually expansion. You weren't falling apart. You were reorganizing yourself into someone they could no longer influence. Now they watch you from a distance with a kind of awe they'll never express out loud. Because seeing you rise ruins their entire narrative. Seeing you stable ruins their expectations. Seeing you peaceful disturbs their assumptions. Seeing you grounded exposes their instability. Seeing you detached exposes their desperation. They aren't panicking because you hurt them. They're panicking because they lost access to the version of you that made them feel powerful. And here's the part that hits them hardest. Your rise wasn't revenge. It was recovery. You didn't break them. They broke themselves trying to break you. You didn't expose them. They exposed each other the moment you left. You didn't humiliate them. They humiliated themselves through projection, envy, and control. You didn't retaliate. They're destroying themselves with the stories they're telling to justify losing someone they never thought would get away. You didn't attack. They're collapsing under the emotional weight they once placed on your shoulders. That's the exact moment where real panic begins. When they realize you didn't need to fight them to win. You didn't need to confront them to end the dynamic. You didn't need to argue to prove anything. Your growth itself was the victory. Your healing itself was the retribution. Your clarity itself was the closing of the chapter. Now watch how life responds. Your path starts opening in ways that don't make logical sense. Connections appear that fit you, not the old version of you. Opportunities align with your potential, not your fears. Peace begins to feel natural, not foreign. Your daily life shifts, not dramatically, but consistently. The absence of chaos becomes your new normal. You start meeting people who speak from authenticity rather than insecurity. You start attracting individuals who don't need to diminish you to feel whole. You start experiencing situations that reflect your growth instead of your wounds. This isn't coincidence, it's recalibration. When you remove a cult's influence from your energy stops bending